The main goal for Parenting Journey is to help families overcome hurdles and divides, whether economic or racial. The nonprofit recently invited partners from other groups with similar missions to its first Social and Family Justice Institute. To tell us about the effort are the Executive Director of Parenting Journey, Imari Jeffries, and the Social and Family Justice Fellow, Marie St. Fleur. Thank you both very much for being with us.
It's good to be here.
I want to start with Imari. How does this event really advance the mission of Parenting Journey?
You know, we work directly with families, and a lot of the families are engaged with other nonprofits. And so there's really a conversation we have to have around a paradigm shift of the service sector really supporting families. And sometimes we see that the service sector replicates inequities that families are going through their practices. And so how do we help them illuminate some of those practices that they're doing inside of their organizations that actually perpetuate the challenges that we see with families who are the most vulnerable?
Marie, I guess one of the lessons here that some organizations like ABCD has known for decades is that the best way to serve people is to let them take charge.
Mm-hmm. And that is still the best way to serve people, is to we're supposed to assist. We're supposed to accompany. We're not supposed to take over and leave them bereft of their own authority and leadership. And I think to some extent we've interpreted human services, delivery of human services, as in that way in this modern age, and we need to sort of turn back and let families lead and support where we can, leading from behind, not taking them. And yeah, I guess that's absolutely right.
Another thing that this institute was really focused on was systemic barriers, and you had a keynote speaker who was talking about that in an interesting way. Tell us about what that was.
Right. So we had Adam Foss, who was our keynote, and so many of us know Adam as one of the assistant attorney, district attorneys in the city of Boston. And so he's recently launched this national nonprofit called Prosecutorial Impact. And so what we understand is that when someone in the family is incarcerated, the entire family is incarcerated, right? It has a rippling effect on not only the family, but the entire community. But if we're being honest, we have to talk about the systemic things that happen in communities and cities that have some families seeing the criminal justice system in one way and other families seeing it in another. And so there's a cycle that I think his organization and Parenting Journey and the way that we do our work try to address.
How do you get from the systemic barriers in the criminal justice system to families, furthering change? What are the dots in the middle?
I think they're totally interconnected, because the reality is that I think what Adam really just highlighted for us yesterday was the fact that, there are a set of privileges, some written and some unwritten, that exist in our society. And depending upon where you fall, on what side of that order you fall, your trajectory in life is different, right? And so and when you interface with some of these systems, so you could, depending upon what side of the track or what side of the border you fall, if you interact with the criminal justice system, you might be, for a minor incident, you might be able to walk away from that with your life intact. But if you come from a different part of that, on the other side of that track, then your interaction, that first interaction with the criminal justice system, may very well take away your life, liberty, not immediately, but in the long run. So, for example, it sets you on a trajectory. You get arrested. Maybe it's a misdemeanor, maybe it's a felony, but now you're in the system. And particularly if you are arrested on a felony, that changes your trajectory, whether or not it's trying to finishing school, whether or not it is trying to get a job. If you can't get a job in the United States, you can't afford a roof over your head, you can't afford to feed yourself. So it impacts. So therefore, those systems, so now you find yourself having to rely on what? Some sort of assistance, whether it's money from the government, whether it's housing. And depending upon the felony, sometimes even in public housing, it's difficult to get public housing, depending upon what the felony is. And so we need to take a step back. We understand that the criminal justice system is not always fair, and that it's implementation of rules that may be neutral, right? Sometimes the laws start off neutral, but it's in the implementation that it loses its neutrality. And sometimes, as we saw with the drug, in cases of the drug, particularly crack and cocaine, it was not neutral. It was intentionally targeting a specific population, which has had a disastrous impact. Because once you lock up the father, or you lock up the mother, you in essence take away opportunity from the children as well, because they don't have a parent who can take care of them as they're required to take care of. Then there are people who never interact with the criminal justice system, right? They just happen to be poor. So let's say we're poor, but I hate to use that word.
But it's a ripple effect of all that.
But there's that ripple effect, because here I am. And then, by the way, our system, our human services systems, the way that they operate, they don't operate to help walk you out of poverty. They, in essence, sometimes every check works as a way to keep you there. So if I'm a struggling mom and I'm working really hard, I have to tell them whether or not I'm searching for work. They may be willing to help me find childcare. And then they might be willing to help me find some workforce development training that would assist me to do a little bit better. So guess what? I do all of that hustling around. By the way, 3 different systems, because they're not all co-located. So you got to sort of track them all down, all the applications, all the various reporting requirements. And you as a mom with 2 or 3 kids are chasing all of that around. But you get through it. You persevere. And then you finally get that opportunity to get that job that's going to actually increase your income. And mind you don't have a safety net, so that increased income looks pretty good, right? And the minute you make $1 above whatever that hard line is, now you're in trouble, because that dollar could cause me to lose the nets that I've actually chased around to get, like the support for the housing that I got because I needed subsidy, because 30 or 40% of my income is spent towards housing, and if I don't have that, I need to get somebody to help me. And so the minute I'd make a little bit more, that housing go away. Maybe it's my child care. The minute I make a little bit more, because you were getting some assistance with the child care, that gets pulled away. So that is what I mean, the intersectionality of systems that don't work to support families.
This has been the news, and we're talking with Marie St. Fleur and Imari Jeffries from Parenting Journey. Imari, another base that was covered at the Institute was to help the parents use video as a way to channel leadership capacity. When would that come into play?
You know, and I think part of what we're talking about is this narrative, right? And so us and Parenting Journey and parents really be in charge of their own counter narrative. And so one of the presenters showed a series of images. And when they showed these images, the first things that popped into our minds were similar images. There was an image of a bunch of African-American men standing against a wall. And so the first thing that many of us thought of was, these guys might be in jail, and instead of these guys might be in a boy band, or these guys might be waiting to register for their college classes. And so how do we change the counter narrative of working class and people who are low income? You know, how do parents do that? How can we as nonprofits stop using these pictures and these images to promote donors and draw money into our organizations? How do we get more fluent around the intersectionality of these issues? Marie brought up a point of what happens when someone gets incarcerated. They're also not eligible to get financial aid in the FAFSA, right? And so if you're a college access organization and you don't understand the impact of incarceration on a family, then you don't know the issues. And so somehow our sector has shifted from leaders like Mel King and Hubie and Frida Garcia, who are fluent on issues of families, and we've got enticed to be specialists. So we help kids get into college. We help workforce development. We help, this after-school program. We've lost the intersectionality of people. So people live in a complex world. We're multidimensional. And so the Institute was about challenging this notion of being two-sectioned, not connecting, not collaborating, and sometimes these systems of having families go here for this and here for this. While it helps the nonprofit sector get better at what we do, this one thing we do, it's not helpful for people, and it's not helpful for change.
As they say in the nonprofit world, they got to get out of their silos. And finally, people want some more information. Imari, is there a way they can check that out?
They could find us online at parentingjourney.org, or they can find us on Facebook, Parenting Journey, or on Twitter.
Thank you very much, Imari Jeffries and Marie St. Fleur.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We'll have more news in just a moment.